Further in Oracle architecture component, we have further concern about the PGA, which is known as the program global area. In program global area, the memory is reserved for the each user processes that contain to an Oracle database. So in program global area, memory is the region that contain the data and control the information for a single server processor or the single background processes. So it includes the components which is sort data, session, cursor states, and the stack space. So sort data, it usually used to sort any sorts that may be required to process the SQL statement. Session information, it includes the user privileges and performance statistics for the session that built between the server process and the user processes. Next we have the cursor state, which indicate the stage in the processing of the SQL statement that is currently used by the session. Next I have the stack space. In stack space it contains the other session in variables. Further we have the process structures. In process structures we have the user process and server process and background process, which we have all further discussed before in details, which is in user processes started when the time when the database user request connecting to the Oracle server process it connect to the Oracle instance, and it start when the session is established. So background process available when the Oracle instance starts. User process we have discussed it in details earlier. Next we have server processes, which also we have discussed. It fulfill the calls generated and the result and return results and can be dedicated to the shared servers. Last our main concern is about the background processes. In background process we have the mandatory background process. First of all we have the database writer. In a DB writer, it write the data from the database and write the data buffer cache and write it on the take the data, read the data from the database and write it on the data buffer cache. So the checkpoints are the fire when it initiate, and the DB write is also initiate. It also present in the dirty buffer cache, which is from the layer 3 cache. Next it's no free buffer. So no layer 1, layer 2 and layer 3 are the free, then the cache is then the data is filled. So last we have next we have the checkpoints buffer cache threshold. So it has a timer when the data is discarded. Table space, so table space offline means when it connect to the when its connection end with the data files, so no data is under the processor. And when we have to take the backup, then we use the table read only. Table space and alter table space is used to name the begin backup. Next we have the logwriter is used to use the commit SQL statement when 1/3 of the memory is full, then it's write it to the log buffer cache, and it's commit both cache and the data read from the log file and database log file, and write data, and it's a refresh after 3 seconds. For example, we have the example of ATM or when they transfer from the app and it also transfer from the app at the same time. Monitoring, which is also known as SMON. So SMON, it is the instance recovery. It is used to create the instance. It is related to the server, which is used to create the instance processes, and it rollback or the reverse transactions. It is used to rollback means to reserve the transaction which is uncommitted or whose data is rollback, whose data is put in the buffer cache, and so we roll back it and give user that your transaction is unsuccessful. So if the system clashes during the process, then we have to perform the roll forward. Roll forward means if transaction is more than 50%, then we do the roll forward, and when the instance create the space allocate, then space allocation is required, and when the system cache is full, when the system crash, so the space is deallocated. Also responsibility of SMON, and if the system crashes use the session, so it can temporarily segment ended and the memory state is deallocated. Process monitoring, also known as PMON, it is used its work is the process recovery. So if the user process fail, it roll back the transaction, and dispatcher communicate with the system if when the system crashes. So it also restart data dispatcher. It also used for the releasing other resources and releasing logs, and roll back the transaction. Checkpoints is used to provide the signals to the DB writer and log writer to start the writing process. So it occur when we commit. Next, it is the work of the checkpoint, and it update the control files with the checkpoint information and update the data files header with the checkpoint information. Next we have the archiver is the optional database operational background processes. So it run in the background, and its work is to recover the offline is used to maintain the offline copies of the redo log files. Last but not the least, we have the logical structure. In logical structure, which consists of the table spaces and which consists of table spaces and segments. So we have one segments which store one table. So further segments divided into the extent, and one extent, and extent is made up of the segment is made up of the extent, and extent is made up of the logical blocks, and logical blocks are the smallest unit to read the data and the write operation. So table spaces, segments, extents, and the blocks are further discussed. So that's for it. That's for our architectural components. Thank you.